Hey everybody, Pastor Mike and Amanda here.
Hey guys.
So Amanda and I just celebrated 24 years of marriage, and one thing that we know is, although there are incredible times in marriage, there's incredibly difficult times in marriage. And for us, one of the things that we do is when we go out on dates, we play a little game, and we look around the restaurant and we see how many couples are on their phones not actually talking to each other. And so what we're trying to do is we want to give you engaging conversation for the dates that you are going to go on with your spouse. Now, one of the things we want to cover is the difference between contract and covenant, because that is a really big difference in how you will view your relationship. So let me just run over these, okay? So contract is for a certain amount of time. As you're on your date, I want you to contrast these two things with your spouse, okay? If you're engaged, then contrast these with your fiancé. If you're dating, have a conversation about, hey, what does marriage look like to you in the future? And so a contract being a certain amount of time, which is going to be paralleled with a covenant that does not have an ending time. So in your relationship, wherever you are on that spectrum, what you have to realize is that there is no end time except for death in your relationship. Okay, now there are some parameters that we're not going to really get into where biblically relationships can end, but that's not our focus of this. Okay, so there's a certain amount of time. A contract would say that both sides have to hold up an agreement. Well, when you come into a marriage relationship in this way, what you're saying is, hey, if you hold up your end of the bargain, I will hold up my end of the bargain. And so a contract is very deliberate, intentional language that says, hey, we're fine as long as you hold up your end of the bargain. Now, that leads us into, they deal with specific actions of kind of, you have to love me, I have to love you, and that bleeds into if and then language. Okay, so for an example, if I said to Amanda, say, hey, if you love me the way I want to be loved, then I will love you back. And she could say the same thing to me. That's contractual obligation in a relationship. Now, on a covenant is initiated for the benefit of another person. As you're here talking through all of these things on your date, I want you to look that person in the eye, and I want you to honestly answer the question in your head, if it's not a good answer: did I initiate this relationship solely for the purpose of my spouse? Or was this to fill something in my own life? Was this to fill a need? I was tired of being lonely. I wanted to have sex. I wanted to have children. I wanted to, whatever, just have some companionship. Or did you start this relationship solely for the benefit of the other person? Because a covenant relationship allows for unconditional promises. Regardless of what I would do that would be wrong to Amanda, in a covenant relationship, she would love me regardless. Regardless of what she would do to me in a covenant relationship, I would love her regardless. Covenant relationship is also permanent, because there's something called steadfast love that's part of a covenant, which is an intentional choice. So Amanda and I have to intentionally decide we're going to love each other. Okay? Now, I can be pretty unlovable at times. I can get into my own head. I can get into my own rhythm and groove of things, doing them the way I want to do it. And she's got to intentionally decide to love me through those things or not. She can revert back to contractual love and say, well, you're not really paying attention to me the way I think you should, or you're not really loving me the way that I think you should. And so therefore, I'm not going to give you that back. And in a covenant relationship, those things are removed from the relationship. You look at each other with grace and love and mercy and truth. And then the last thing is, it requires loving confrontation and forgiveness. I want to run a scenario by you. Let's say that your spouse, you see them struggling with something. Is it loving to sit back and say, I'm just going to let them work this out? I'm going to give them grace. I would say no, that's not loving at all. Because a covenant relationship is loving confrontation and forgiveness. So, for an example, if Amanda were, reverting back to something that she had in her past, I can look at her and go, I don't really want to start a fight. I know this is going to be an argument, so I'm just going to hang back and see how this plays itself out. Well, that's not loving her. That's me being selfish. So what this would look like is I would lovingly confront her with Scripture, make sure you heard the lovingly part, and then I'm going to forgive her, whether she asks for it or not. Okay? Big difference in covenant and contract. So, as you're here on your date, hopefully you wrote these things down. It's the only time you're allowed to have your phone out is if you're taking notes right now, okay? Put them down and talk through these things, covenant or contract. Now, obviously, I'm the talker in this relationship. Amanda has hardly said anything, but I'm sure she has lots of great things to say about this, and you'll hear from her probably at a later date. But we want you to have fun on your date. We want you to have a covenant relationship. If you are a follower of Jesus, you have a covenant relationship with him, and we want to see this played out in your marriage. Love y'all. Talk to you soon. Bye.